5 minutes ago, Jack Nicholson testifies in court on day 17 of Diddy Trial, and what he revealed left the courtroom in complete shock. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. The courtroom was packed to capacity, the air thick with anticipation and a low hum of murmurs. Reporters jockeyed for position, cameras clicked rapidly, and the spectators leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on the entrance. It was rare to see a figure as iconic as Jack Nicholson appear as a witness, and even rarer for him to claim he had something that could shake the foundations of the music industry. The judge called the court to order, banging the gavel firmly. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Jack Nicholson entered the room with that trademark half-smile, the one that suggested he knew something others didn't. He walked steadily to the witness stand, his presence commanding attention without a word. The judge nodded at him, and Jack adjusted the microphone before turning to face the room. His voice was calm but steady, gravelly with age and experience. "I'm here today to present evidence. Evidence that's been hidden away for years, but now it's time it sees the light of day." The prosecutor leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly with interest. "Mr. Nicholson, you've been in possession of this evidence for some time?" Jack nodded slowly. "Yes. Found it recently among some old belongings at my Mulholland Drive estate. It's a recording, a security tape. But not just any tape. This one shows something significant. Something the public has never been allowed to see." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Journalists exchanged knowing looks. The name Mulholland Drive carried weight in Hollywood, but it was the description that followed that truly caught everyone's attention. This was said to be footage of a secret meeting involving Diddy and several powerful music executives from 2004. The meeting had long been rumored, referred to in hushed tones as the Night of the Pact. It was an event surrounded by mystery, speculation, and conspiracy theories, but no one had ever had proof, until now. The judge asked Jack to hand over the tape, and he complied, carefully placing the evidence on the table before the court clerk. "This tape could change everything we think we know about the music industry," Jack said quietly. "It shows a side of the business no one talks about, a side where deals were made in the shadows, deals that shaped careers, manipulated markets, and maybe even controlled the industry itself." The defense attorneys immediately sprang into action, questioning the tape's authenticity and Jack's motives. They argued it could be doctored, taken out of context, or even outright fabricated. But the judge, after a brief review, ruled the tape admissible. The courtroom grew quiet again, a sense of tension tightening like a wire. The jury watched intently, understanding that what came next could upend powerful interests. Jack took a breath, then looked out at the jury and the crowd. "I'm not here to settle scores. I'm here because I believe the truth matters. This tape, it's a piece of history that can't be ignored. And today, I'm going to show you what really happened that night." The buzz in the room died down to a hush as the judge ordered the doors closed. The tape would play behind closed doors, away from the public eye, for reasons of privacy and legal protocol. But the weight of what it contained hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Outside the courtroom, reporters speculated wildly. What secrets would the tape reveal? What power had been wielded in that shadowy meeting? And most importantly, how would the revelations affect the music industry, the celebrities involved, and the public's trust? Inside, the players were ready. Jack Nicholson had stepped forward, and the stage was set. The courtroom wasn't just a place for law anymore. It was about to become the arena for a reckoning that would shake the foundations of entertainment itself. Jack settled into the witness stand, the weight of decades in Hollywood and beyond etched on his face. The courtroom was still buzzing from the shock of his announcement. Everyone wanted to know more. How exactly did this tape come to be, and why had it stayed hidden for so long? Jack cleared his throat and began, his voice steady but carrying a hint of gravity. "This tape wasn't something I was looking for. It was more like a discovery," he said. "Years ago, when I was going through some old files and belongings at my estate on Mulholland Drive, I came across a box I didn't even remember having. Inside, there was this tape, unlabeled, forgotten. I watched it out of curiosity, and what I saw changed everything." The defense lawyers immediately jumped in, challenging the chain of custody. "Mr. Nicholson, can you guarantee the tape wasn't tampered with? That it is what you say it is?" Jack nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I'm certain. I had it verified by independent experts. The footage is genuine. What it shows is real." The prosecutor nodded, sensing a turning point. "Can you describe what is on the tape for the court?" Jack took a deep breath. It's a meeting. A secret meeting from 2004, where Diddy and several powerful music executives gathered in a private room. Not a public event. Not a press conference. A closed-door discussion. The kind of thing that shapes industries behind the scenes. The courtroom shifted. Names like Diddy carried enormous weight, but the mention of powerful executives hinted at something bigger. Forces most people never saw or understood. Jack explained that the meeting wasn't just about routine business. It was about controlling the narrative, the market, and the direction of music itself. It was clear they were making decisions that affected artists, record labels, radio stations, and even the charts, Jack said. It wasn't just business. It was influence. Control. A murmur spread among the jurors. This was more than a simple gathering. It was a glimpse into the hidden engine room of the music world. The prosecutor asked about the tone of the meeting. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly as he recalled the footage. Tense. Serious. There was a feeling of urgency, like they were deciding something critical, something that could not be allowed to fail. And the stakes were high. Outside the courtroom, the media was abuzz. Social platforms exploded with speculation, theories, and questions. Who were these executives? What had they agreed on? Why had no one heard about this before? The phrase, the night of the pact, took on new life, and public interest surged. Back inside, the defense team argued that the tape was an invasion of privacy, and that the meeting was a standard negotiation blown out of proportion by rumors and paranoia. They questioned Jack's credibility, suggesting his involvement in Hollywood might bias his view of the music industry. But Jack was prepared. He shared that the tape's contents lined up with stories he had heard over the years. Whispers of deals made in shadows, artists pushed aside, and markets manipulated. This was confirmation of what many suspected but could never prove. For too long, these conversations happened in the dark, Jack said quietly. Now, we have the chance to bring them into the light. The judge allowed the tape to be played, but only behind closed doors, citing legal protections. This left the public and press waiting for a full release, while the courtroom insiders absorbed what they could. The tension was palpable. Jack's testimony brought the hidden world of music industry politics crashing into the courtroom. What had once been gossip and suspicion now had a face and a name. The shadows of the past were no longer just whispers, they were evidence. And as the trial continued, everyone in that room knew this was only the beginning. Behind closed doors, the courtroom settled into an intense hush as the grainy security footage began to play. The air was thick with anticipation and unease. Faces of jurors, lawyers, and court officials were bathed in the flickering glow of the screen, where the long-hidden moments from 2004 started to unfold. What no one had expected was just how chilling and revealing the footage would be. The tape opened with a dimly lit room. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, and a heavy, almost oppressive silence hung over the scene. The camera angle was fixed, but it captured a dozen or so men, all dressed sharply in tailored suits, sitting around a large oval table. At the center was Sean Diddy Combs, charismatic, commanding, and unmistakably in control. His eyes scanned the room, steady and sharp, as if calculating every move. Voices were low but urgent, a murmur of conversation that quickly grew into clipped exchanges and pointed remarks. The room felt tense, like a high-stakes poker game where the chips weren't just money. They were careers, reputations, and entire legacies. Documents were slid across the table, hands gestured with quiet intensity, and every nod seemed to seal a fate. Fragments of their conversation drifted into clear focus as the tape's audio improved. Words like market share, radio play, and distribution channels floated through the room. There were mentions of specific artists, names that once dominated the charts but suddenly disappeared without explanation. The executives spoke of strategies to maintain control and methods to silence competition. It was not a simple business meeting. It was a blueprint for dominance. At one point, Diddy leaned forward, voice calm but firm. This pact isn't just about business. It's about shaping the future. We decide who rises, who falls. The music, the message, the money, it all runs through us. His words were met with nods and murmured agreements. There was no room for dissent, no space for fairness. The pact was absolute. Jack Nicholson, sitting quietly in the courtroom, watched as the evidence played out. He had seen rumors before, heard the stories in Hollywood corridors and music studios, but seeing it laid bare was something else entirely. The faces on the screen, the power behind the scenes, were both familiar and unsettling. The image of these men making deals that could make or break lives made the stakes painfully clear. The jurors exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and concern. For many, this was a revelation, a peek behind the curtain of an industry they thought they knew. It was unsettling to realize how much influence these few individuals wielded, far beyond the spotlight's glare. Outside the courtroom, the media was abuzz. Reporters struggled to piece together what they could from the limited descriptions, fueling speculation and fierce debates. Was this the end of an era of unchecked power? Or just another scandal waiting to be buried? Back inside, the defense team scrambled to regain control. They questioned the tape's authenticity again, raised doubts about editing, and argued that these were just ordinary business discussions blown out of proportion. But the prosecutor countered by calling in experts who confirmed the tape's integrity and the voices' identities. As the tape continued, it revealed subtle but powerful signs of the pact's depth. There were discussions about limiting radio exposure for certain artists, manipulating award outcomes, and using media influence to suppress dissenting voices. It was a network of control, woven tightly and deliberately. The judge reminded everyone that the viewing was strictly confidential. The true impact of the tape was meant for the courtroom alone, for now. But the shockwaves it sent rippled beyond those walls, stirring questions about fairness, justice, and power. The trial had shifted. It was no longer just a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning, a chance to confront decades of hidden control and question who really held the keys to the music kingdom. Jack glanced around the room. The faces watching the tape had changed. The disbelief was now replaced by a heavy silence, the kind that comes when something long hidden finally comes into the light. As the tape played on, a broader picture began to emerge, revealing that the pact forged on that night wasn't just about controlling the music charts. The footage hinted at connections that stretched far beyond the recording studios and concert stages. Jack Nicholson described how the meeting included not only music executives and Diddy, but also figures linked to media conglomerates and advertising giants. Power brokers who operated behind layers of influence. The room wasn't just about music, Jack told the court. It was a crossroads where media, marketing, and politics intersected. They weren't just controlling songs, they were controlling narratives. What you heard on the radio, what you saw on TV, even what you read in magazines, all of it was shaped by these alliances. The jurors absorbed the gravity of the statement. This was a web of influence that touched every corner of entertainment and culture. The tape showed moments where the executives discussed strategic partnerships with major media outlets. One executive mentioned leveraging the right platforms to push their favorite artists, while another spoke about tightening relationships with key advertisers. It became clear that the pact was designed to create an ecosystem where power reinforced power, leaving little room for outsiders or dissenters. Jack explained how these alliances translated into real-world effects. Radio stations were pressured to limit airplay for artists who didn't fit the pact's agenda. Music video channels favored the approved stars, and award shows tilted their nominations and wins toward those who played by the rules. Behind the scenes, deals were struck to maintain this control, ensuring that money and influence stayed concentrated in the hands of a few. The defense attorneys argued this was standard business strategy, nothing illegal or conspiratorial. But prosecutors pushed back, saying these weren't just strategies but systemic efforts to manipulate the industry, often at the expense of fairness and competition. The courtroom debate became heated, with legal experts dissecting whether these actions crossed the line into collusion. Jack's testimony made it clear that the pact's reach extended even into political circles. There were discussions about aligning with certain politicians and regulators, using influence to shape laws favorable to the industry's elite. This wasn't just business. It was power operating at its most potent, quietly shaping culture and policy. Outside the court, reactions were mixed. Some music insiders confirmed these alliances, acknowledging the industry's opaque nature. Others defended the status quo, claiming the industry was simply adapting to market demands. Fans and artists expressed shock and anger, feeling betrayed by a system that prioritized profits over talent and fairness. The jury listened intently as Jack described the consequences of these unseen alliances. For years, we thought the music industry was about art, talent, and hard work. But behind the curtain, it was often about who you knew and who you aligned with. The pact kept the system closed. It made sure the same faces stayed on top while others got pushed aside. The courtroom felt heavier with each revelation. This was more than a secret meeting. It was a blueprint for control that had shaped popular culture for decades. The stakes were enormous, and the implications reached far beyond the individuals involved. Jack paused, looking around the room. This isn't just a story about music or money. It's about who gets to decide what we hear, see, and believe. And until now, most people had no idea. The defense team prepared their next move, determined to undermine the credibility of the tape and Jack's testimony. But the damage was done. The veil of secrecy had been lifted, and the PAC's unseen alliances were now exposed. As the trial moved forward, everyone understood that what began as a single secret meeting was actually the heart of a vast network. And unraveling it would change the music industry, and possibly the culture itself, forever. The courtroom was no longer just a room for legal arguments. It had become a stage where the most influential figures in the music world were being called into question. As the trial unfolded, testimonies from former insiders and industry experts began to paint a fuller picture of the pact and the people who shaped it. These weren't just names on a list. They were the power players, the men and women whose decisions affected millions of lives, careers, and fortunes. One by one, witnesses took the stand. A former record executive spoke of how the pact influenced contract negotiations, dictating which artists received promotion and which were quietly sidelined. It was clear, he said, that if you weren't part of the inner circle, your chances of success were slim to none. The pact controlled who got airplay, who got shelf space in stores, even who got nominated for awards. Musicians who'd been pushed out or ignored also came forward, their voices tinged with frustration and regret. One artist described how her career stalled despite talent and hard work. "I was told I wasn't marketable because I didn't fit the narrative they wanted," she said. "It felt like an invisible wall kept me from breaking through, no matter how much I tried." Jack Nicholson listened quietly as these stories emerged, knowing that his tape had opened the door to long-hidden truths. The prosecution emphasized that the pact wasn't a mere coincidence of business interests, but a deliberate effort to maintain a monopoly over influence and profit. The power players, they argued, worked as a united front, making sure their interests were protected at every turn. Defense attorneys countered by calling some witnesses unreliable or motivated by bitterness. They insisted that competition and business politics were part of any industry and that no unlawful conspiracy existed. But the weight of the evidence and the testimony made it difficult to dismiss the allegations outright. The jurors seemed particularly struck by the stories of loyalty and fear within the industry. Several witnesses spoke of a culture where dissent could lead to blacklisting, and where crossing the pact meant risking one's career or safety. The pact wasn't just about deals on paper. It was about real power, enforced through social pressure and sometimes intimidation. The courtroom's atmosphere grew tense as lawyers debated the fine line between legal business strategy and illegal collusion. Experts explained how some tactics used by the pact could violate antitrust laws, potentially breaking the law by suppressing competition. The question hung heavy. Had the music industry's biggest names engaged in criminal behavior to maintain control? Jack's role as a witness became even more critical. He reminded the court that what he had found was a rare glimpse into a hidden world, one that few outsiders had ever seen. "This isn't just about fame or money," he said. "It's about fairness, about giving every artist a chance to be heard." Outside, the public followed every twist. Fans rallied behind artists who'd spoken out, while some industry insiders worried about the fallout. The media painted the power players as puppeteers, pulling strings behind a carefully constructed curtain. Inside the courtroom, the judge reminded everyone to focus on facts, not rumors. The trial was far from over, and the path ahead promised to be messy. But for the first time, the power players were not untouchable. Their actions, once shielded by silence and secrecy, were now under the harsh spotlight of justice. Jack glanced around the room, sensing the shift. What started as a single tape was unraveling a whole system, one built on hidden agreements, loyalty, and fear. The power players were exposed, and the music industry would never look the same again. As the trial moved deeper into the heart of the matter, cracks began to show in the seemingly unbreakable pact. New witnesses stepped forward. Whistleblowers from within the industry who had once been silent out of fear or loyalty, but now felt compelled to tell the truth. Their testimonies added layers of detail and confirmed suspicions. This wasn't just a tight-knit business arrangement. It was a system rife with cover-ups and intimidation. One former insider described how deals were enforced not just by contracts, but by threats and behind-the-scenes pressure. If you didn't play ball, there were consequences, she testified. Some artists were blacklisted from radio, others found their contracts mysteriously voided. It was a way to keep control. Her voice shook slightly, the weight of past fear still evident. Jack listened quietly as the courtroom absorbed these revelations. The tape he had brought to light was only the beginning. Accompanying evidence, emails, financial records, and recorded phone calls painted a detailed picture of how the pact operated in practice. It was a network of influence that didn't just manage careers. It manipulated the very systems that should have been fair. The defense pushed back hard, trying to discredit the whistleblowers as disgruntled or seeking revenge. They questioned the authenticity of documents and the legality of the investigation methods. But prosecutors countered with expert witnesses who verified the evidence and confirmed the patterns of behavior. Tensions ran high as the courtroom grappled with the real possibility that this pact had broken antitrust laws and other regulations meant to protect competition and fairness. The once mighty shield of silence was cracking. What had been unthinkable was now in full view. Diddy's legal team remained defiant, insisting that their client was innocent and that the meeting was a standard business discussion. But as more evidence came to light, it was clear the trial was turning into a reckoning for the industry's power structure. The judge reminded all parties of the seriousness of the accusations. This wasn't just about money or contracts. It was about systemic corruption that had shaped an entire cultural landscape. The court was tasked with untangling a complicated web of relationships and influences that had long operated in the shadows. Outside the courtroom, the fallout was already beginning. Record labels started internal reviews, and some executives quietly resigned or stepped back from public roles. Musicians and fans called for reform and transparency, demanding changes to a system many felt had betrayed its own artists. Jack, meanwhile, remained a calm presence amid the storm. He understood the risks of bringing this all to light, but believed it was necessary. "Truth is never easy," he said quietly to a reporter after one session. "But if we don't face it, nothing will change." The trial's revelations stirred debates about the role of power in entertainment and how easily influence can be misused. People began to question what they had accepted as normal for so long. The cracks in the pact were no longer small fractures. They were breaks that threatened to collapse the entire structure. As the courtroom prepared for the next phase, everyone involved knew the story was far from over. The pact had controlled the music industry for years, but now the walls were closing in. The fight for justice had shifted from secret meetings to public scrutiny, and nothing would ever be the same. News of the trial and the explosive tape leaked out, igniting a firestorm far beyond the courtroom walls. Headlines screamed about the night of the pact and the shadowy meeting that supposedly controlled the music world for decades. Social media exploded with hashtags, heated debates, and waves of both support and skepticism. Fans of all ages questioned everything they thought they knew about their favorite artists and the industry itself. Inside the music business, the fallout was immediate and intense. Record labels scrambled to control the damage. Executives who once operated behind closed doors suddenly found themselves under a microscope. Some resigned quietly, others defended their actions aggressively. The carefully maintained image of the industry was cracking, and the cracks were widening fast. Musicians who had felt sidelined or silenced by the pact's influence began speaking out publicly. Interviews and open letters flooded the media, with artists sharing stories of missed opportunities, unfair treatment, and pressure to conform to industry demands. The public, long enchanted by the glamour of the music scene, now grappled with the reality of a business built on hidden deals and power plays. Jack Nicholson watched the news unfold with a mix of satisfaction and solemnity. He understood that exposing the truth meant shaking a foundation that had long seemed unshakable. "This isn't just about one night or one tape," he told a reporter. "It's about changing a system that has been broken for too long." Meanwhile, the courtroom remained tense. The judge reminded everyone that, despite the public uproar, the trial's focus was on the facts and the law. The jury, meanwhile, wrestled with the weight of what they'd seen and heard. This wasn't a simple case of contracts or business disagreements. It was about fairness, transparency, and accountability. The defense fought to minimize the damage. They argued that the pact was no more than a series of business arrangements, that power dynamics were natural in any industry, and that the evidence was circumstantial. But for many, the damage was already done. The idea that a few individuals could dictate the course of an entire industry left a bitter taste. Outside, advocacy groups and artist collectives called for reforms: transparency in contracts, fairer royalty distributions, and protections against retaliation for those who spoke out. The trial had sparked a movement, with artists and fans alike demanding a new era of openness and fairness. Jack found himself at the center of this storm. Some praised him as a hero, someone brave enough to challenge a system many feared. Others accused him of stirring trouble or betraying old friendships. But Jack remained focused on the bigger picture. "This is about more than me," he said. "It's about giving everyone a fair shot." As the trial drew toward its conclusion, the courtroom prepared for the final arguments. The stakes had never been higher. What began as a secret meeting recorded on a forgotten tape had turned into a reckoning for the music industry, one that would change it forever. The jury would soon decide whether the pact was a criminal conspiracy or simply a business alliance. But regardless of the verdict, the trial had opened the door to a new chapter. One where power was questioned, secrets were exposed, and the future of music was being rewritten. The courtroom was tense as the jury filed back in, the weight of weeks of testimony and evidence hanging heavy in the air. Every eye was fixed on the judge, who called the room to order with a firm tap of the gavel. The moment of truth had arrived. After days of deliberation, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict. Jack Nicholson sat quietly, his face calm but his eyes revealing the tension beneath. Across the room, Sean Diddy Combs watched intently, his expression unreadable, a mask of control worn by a man accustomed to high stakes. The trial had exposed much more than anyone expected, shaking the foundations of the music industry and stirring a public reckoning. The judge cleared his throat and began reading the verdict. The jury found that while the secret meeting did involve coordinated efforts to influence aspects of the music industry, the evidence fell short of proving a criminal conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. The pact, as the jury saw it, was a series of aggressive business strategies rather than a legal collusion. A mixture of reactions swept through the courtroom. Some breathed sighs of relief, others expressed disappointment. Jack felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. The verdict wasn't what many had hoped for, but the trial itself had achieved something significant. It had pulled back the curtain on a world of power and influence previously hidden from public view. Outside, the news spread rapidly. Headlines reflected the mixed emotions. No criminal conspiracy, but industry secrets exposed. Trial ends with more questions than answers. Music world faces new scrutiny. The public debate continued, fueled by the revelations brought forward during the trial. The pact might not have been criminal, but it was certainly influential, and for many, that was enough to demand change. In the days that followed, calls for reform grew louder. Industry leaders announced plans to review business practices, and some promised greater transparency and fairness. Artist organizations pushed for better protections, hoping the trial would mark a turning point in how the music world operated. Jack found himself reflecting on what the trial had meant, not just for him, but for the future. "The truth is," he said in an interview, "sometimes exposing the problem is the first step. The system may not have been broken by law, but it was broken for the people it was supposed to serve. That's what we need to fix." The music industry was at a crossroads. The trial had opened eyes and sparked conversations that would continue for years. Artists, executives, and fans were all grappling with what fairness really meant in a world shaped by hidden alliances and unseen forces. As for Jack, the experience left him changed. He had stepped into the spotlight once more, not as an actor, but as a witness to a complex and powerful world. He knew the fight wasn't over. The pact's story might have reached a legal end, but its cultural impact was just beginning. The courtroom emptied, but the echoes remained. The night of the pact had been revealed, not with a dramatic crash, but with a steady unraveling of truth. And that truth, no matter the verdict, had changed everything.